In today's module, we're going to do another joins practice. And we're going to be using a new data set that Google BigQuery has, which is election data. This is going to be just a single part. It takes a long time just to get through the whole thing. It's going to be about 25 minutes. If you're taking this course live with me as I'm publishing it, then you will know that it is election season in the US. So I have a really fun example for us to go through in this module. So we want to look back at the political donations that were made in 2020. So this is recorded in 24. In the US, this is one previous election cycle, presidential election cycle. So political money flows in a particular way in the US. So first, it starts off with people who make donations to committees. This can be individual contributors. It can also be corporations. It can be anything that the US classifies as people. And yes, to answer your question, corporations are considered people here in the good old USA. So people make the donations to the committees, and committees give that money to candidates. And then that candidate is associated with one party. So that's the typical flow of the money that goes through the US political cycle. Google BigQuery has an entire database that's dedicated to providing information on the political donations. And that comes in a couple different tables, or what I'm going to call our puzzle pieces. Donation table. And if we think back to that previous slide, this is the top of that political cycle where we start at the individuals, then it goes to committees, then that goes to a particular party. So this is at the donor and committee level. Then we have the committee information, and this is at the committee and candidate level. So we have donors, committees, and then finally we have the candidate, which is tied to the party. So looking at this, when we're coming in with our SQL minds and how we're thinking about joins, what we want to know is how do these three different tables relate to each other? And if we look at the level of each table, you'll notice something. From table individual to committee, we see that they both are at the committee level. So when we're thinking about how do these two tables relate, it's because they join on the committees. Likewise, looking at committees to candidates, we see that they both have the candidate level. So that's how those two tables are connected. So if I wanted to go straight from donations and then go all the way to candidate, I can't do it because the candidate level, this guy here on this third table, he only has candidate information. My table on this left side, he has donor and committee information. And I'm not able to force those two things together unless I have this middle table here who has the committee information. The first thing that you might think of is, well, why don't we just have one table with all of the information? That was my first thought when I was learning about SQL tables and databases. The reason why we can't just have one big, huge table that has the donor information, committee information, and candidate information is because, one, that's a lot of space. So this donation information table, this is individual transactions. This might be millions and millions and millions of rows long. In comparison, your committee information, there's only so many committees that are in the US. We still might have several thousand, but we don't have several million. And likewise, with candidate information, we have maybe a couple of thousand total candidates through all the different types of elections. We don't have it in one big one because of the data space, and then there's also some other things that as you become more experienced with SQL and understanding the flow of data and how things work in a productionalized environment, you'll see the benefit of having these tables split out. Okay, off my pulpit, let's get into the meat and potatoes. All right, the task that I have for you today. We are going to use the individual donation table and the committee tables. That's table 1 and 2 from the previous slide. We're going to find the total amount of donations contributed from the one and only Reese Witherspoon. And this is a fun little GIF from Legally Blonde. If you haven't seen it, please culture yourself, watch it today. We want to include the number of times Reese donated as well as the total amount that she donated in the 2020 election cycle. We want to include the party affiliation and the candidate ID. So the two tables that we have is the BigQuery individual table I do want to apologize. We do have some really major thunderstorms where I'm recording today. So if you're hearing some booms and bams, that is the thunderstorm. Okay, so we're looking at the individual table for 2020, CM 2020, which is the committee table. So let's just go back to that previous slide really quick. So what you're tasked with is you're starting with this donation information and you have this committee information. We want to connect these two tables. Note what they share is the committee level information. So we need to connect tables 1 and 2. We need to show only Reese Witherspoon, and then we want to see how much was donated and how many times she donated. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. Okay, here you are. You have your two tables. You have your instructions. Pause the video, take a few minutes, and then when you're ready, start it back up, and then I'll go over the solution. Welcome back. I hope that wasn't too difficult. Let's open up the BigQuery console and knock this example out. Okay, so we're going to pretend like I am just seeing this problem for the first time and how would I tackle it. So the instructions that we have are simple. Use the following tables, find the total number of times and the total amount Reese Witherspoon donated to specific committees in 2020. The first thing that I would do is I would write out those detailed instructions like I had in the beginning part of the course. So let's go ahead and just do that. And this is called our pseudocode. Okay, so step 1, identify, pull out Reese Witherspoon's donations from the individual contributor table. Okay, once I have that, the next step, step 2, attach committee level information to the data I gathered in step 1. And then step 3. Step 3, aggregate my data to the committee and person level, i.e. committee plus Reese, to find the total amount donated, sum of all donations, and the number of times donated per committee, count of donations. Okay, so now that I have my pseudocode, the next thing that I'm going to do, we're just going to knock it out. So here we have step 1. So I do my copy and paste. This is my North Star right here, the pseudocode. Anytime I get lost, turned upside down, I go back to this and I see where am I in my steps. And if I hit somewhere that I wasn't able to outline from the beginning, then I add that in to my pseudocode. So whatever you put here, it doesn't mean that it's 100% correct. It just means this is where I'm going to start. And as I come up with problems or complications, then I continue to flesh this out. Okay, so here we are at step 1. So like always, we start with our select. We don't know what we need yet. We do know we're going to have to pull it from this table. We also know we're going to do a filter. We need a filter because we need to filter to Reese. So that's the first thing I'm going to try to do is, can I get this table and can I get it down to just Reese Witherspoon? So if I open it up, I see something promising here, name, city, state. Let's do a preview. Okay, when I look at the name, these appear to be people's names. This looks like I could probably find a Reese Witherspoon in here. Something to keep in mind is that it looks like it's last name, comma, first name. It also looks like some people have a middle initial. And some people also have like a, I don't know what you call it, like an address. So if they're a Mr. or a Mrs., or maybe if they were a third or a junior. So this name format, it's not super easy for me to filter. So if I were to just type in where name equals Reese Witherspoon. And my select is empty, so let's do select star. So the first thing is that I called her Witherspoons. Witherspoon. Do I get anything? No. Well, we said it was last, comma first. You're probably hollering at me about that. So let's do last, comma first. Okay. So I received 12 different donations. Now, it could be such that there is another donation by Reese, but for whatever her name instead of being Reese Witherspoon was Mrs. Reese Witherspoon or Ms. So filtering it like this, I don't like this 100%. Even though it did get us some rows, if I'm being like a really good data analyst, I want to make my query a little bit more resilient. So what I would do is I would say where name like Reese. So we're saying if it says Reese anywhere and name like Witherspoon. And now I'm going to look. Okay, I only have 12 rows again, so I think I'm okay. The only Reese Witherspoon combination in this data set is our one and only Ms. Reese Witherspoon, who lives in LA, and her occupation is entertainment/entertainer. And then we can see that her employer that she has listed is something called Ladybird Inc. If I had to guess, that's probably like her production company. Okay, so now I've filtered to Reese. Now let's look and see what information that I need. I definitely need the name, so let's put that in there. I have a transaction ID, image. This looks like the report time period, so Q1, a monthly 10, Q3. This is committee ID. We know that's very important. But I don't have any dollars. How many dollars did Reese give? Okay, this is looking good. We have transaction date and we have transaction amount. And then let's see. We also have a transaction ID. So let's go ahead and just pull in the transaction amount. And if I didn't know anything, I would probably pull in that transaction ID just in case. Anytime you see something called ID, an ID is typically something that connects to another table. So I don't know exactly which ID I need in this moment, but I'm just going to pull it in for right now. Okay, so now let's do this again with just our limited columns. Fabulous. So I have Reese, I have committee IDs, transaction IDs, and I have amounts. And if I look at these, I can see that some of these are repeated. This guy, he's repeated a few times. Now, part of you might say, hey, I already have the committee ID. I already have Reese Witherspoon. I can just go ahead and just sum this. So I could do one of these. And then count as total donations. Oh, but I didn't group. And I do have this information here, but this committee ID, he doesn't mean anything to me. I want to know what is the committee's name and then what is the party he's affiliated with. And if I go to this table, I just don't have that information. If I search committee, I only get the ID. So we need to do something so that we can map these committee IDs and then pull in what is the committee name and then what is the party they're affiliated with. Okay, so now that I have this, let me go to part 2. And I kind of mixed up how I was organizing this. There's a lot of ways to win, but let's just leave our transaction amount here. We're going to undo that group by for now. we'll come back. And we'll put it back to how it was. Okay. And then we need to get rid of the group by. Okay, so I've done step 1. Pull out Reese Witherspoon donations from the individual contributor table. Step 2. Attach committee level information to the data I gathered in step 1. Great. So now let's open up a new tab. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at this table. I have committee ID, committee name, treasury name, and a bunch of other stuff. So let's look at it. Okay, so I see for every committee ID, for most of them, I have a committee name along with a treasury name, including additional information. Their PO box, where they're located, the state, the zip code, basically their mailing address, party affiliation, filing frequency. I could imagine this is annual, quarterly. I don't know what T stands for. Connected organization name, and then candidate ID. Okay, so let's put this guy to the right. Okay, so I have my table here, and what I want to do is I want to attach committee ID. Wherever I have committee CO4112, I want him attached here. Okay, so this was step 1. Now I'm doing step 2. Step 2, attach committee information. We're going to do inner join my table. And so there's 2 ways we could do this. So once I introduce the second table, now we need to start doing aliasing. So for this one, I'm going to call him as individual, indiv, and then as commit for committee. And then I'm going to add my aliasing here. So this way I know that these columns come from this table. And then from the committee, what I want is the committee name. And where's committee party? And committee party affiliation. So from commit, I want committee party affiliation. I also want committee name. Okay, so now I have the columns that I want. I have this join. I need to connect these two. And how are these two related? They're related because they both share a committee ID. Committee ID. So we're going to say on individual dot committee ID equals commit dot committee ID. Now, when you're really lucky in Google BigQuery, if you have a column with the same name, we can shorten this a little bit. This is using on plus the dot nomenclature or dot notation. We can shorten this using something called using. And we say, hey, Google BigQuery, both of these guys have committee ID. This is how they're connected. This is the same thing as above. Okay, so now we're going to hit Control Enter, or in Apple, I don't know what it's called, the command button, and enter. Okay. So let's look at our table, see what we got. All right, so I see here that we have a couple different guys. We have something called Act Blue, and it looks like for whatever reason, this guy, he is not associated to a party or to a candidate, most likely, because it looks like the party affiliation is missing. But I do see that I have donation amounts. So let's go ahead and add in a fill-in for this guy. So if the committee party affiliation is missing, we're going to say that. So in here, for committee affiliation, we're going to say if committee affiliation is null, then missing, otherwise, just leave it as is. And if you didn't do this, that's okay. I'm being super detailed as like I'm a, tenured data analyst. This is how I'm doing my project. All right, let's run it again. Okay. So now for this Act Blue, for whatever reason, his party affiliation was missing. That's something that we would probably have to look into more detail into the data at another time. But we see now we have missing, or we have DEM, which in the US, that is for the Democratic Party. And we see these different transaction amounts. All right. Now that I have my table like this, now it's time to aggregate. In general, the rule of thumb is when you're doing multi-steps like this with aggregations and joins, you're best off getting your table just like you need here, making sure you have all your pieces lined up, and then aggregating. At least when you're first starting out. When you're first starting out, that's the best way. When people try to add in the group by while doing the joins and doing everything else, they make mistakes, and because it's been grouped, they can't identify their mistakes. So this is a good way when you're first starting out to feel really confident in the data that you're doing. So we're going to wrap this guy in a CTE with base as, this is my base table. Tab. Okay. And since I have my formatting all nice and pretty, I can collapse. So this is what my table looks like. And what do I want? I want to know, select name, select committee name, select committee party affiliation, sum transaction amount as total donated, count star as times donated from my base table, and we're going to group by 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so here we go. So now we have 4 different committees. One was Kamala Harris for president, Amy McGrath for Senate, Gillibrand 2020. I don't know who that is. That might be a state type of legislative person. And then this Act Blue who has a missing party affiliation. And then we have the total amounts donated for each different committee and the number of times donated. Let's jump back to the PowerPoint and wrap up this lesson. So to wrap up, in today's lesson, what we did is we introduced a new data set, our political affiliation information, and we looked at how the tables are connected. And then we practiced, once again, one of our inner joins. In the next lesson, we're going to look at some pre-made queries that Google BigQuery provides as examples on how to use their databases, and then also explore how can we use the information that Google BigQuery already provides so that we can have a better understanding of the data that they have. And this is a really, really good practical experience. See you there.